Ground Control, this is Striker Star 19, here to give my mission debrief of seeing the Addams Family. I checked out this movie, and I hope you weren't hoping for a more exciting verdict than it's pretty much what it looks like. It's a completely okay family kids movie to see around Halloween. I think it fulfills that perfectly fine. It didn't blow my mind. I laughed a few times. It was like just a perfectly good movie for kids. I guess I was pretty pleasantly surprised because I'm not that fond of the Addams Family as an IP. I think they're kind of lame. I know that's kind of, well, I'm not super familiar with their whole history. I just think they're the kind of characters that get misconstrued in a mean-spirited way in their counterculture. And I think the movie from, it might have been the 80s, I almost want to say the 90s, the one with Christopher Lloyd, I think that's like the lamest movie in the world. I hate that movie. I watched it just not too long ago and I did not find it funny, and I thought the plot was beyond convoluted. Like, oh, it's all about like Fester is long lost, even though he's a long established character, and he secretly has amnesia. It's a whole mess. I don't need to. This isn't about. I think that movie is so lame, but I guess that's not what we're talking about. I like the sequel, even though it's been a super long time since I've seen it. The one with the baby, I remember that one being funnier than the first one. But I think this version is a pretty I don't want to say definitive, but it's a pretty good version of the Addams Family to try out if you're extremely curious. It's completely harmless. I was really concerned by the super heavy celebrity casting of it. You had like let's see, Oscar Isaac is Gomez, and Charlize Theron is Morticia. So like it always concerns me when an animated movie flaunts its cast like that, because there's no reason like a kid would be like, oh, I want to see Charlize Theron in Addams Family. Excuse me. And it just like, yeah, it just seems like a really cheap way to bolster a bad movie. And at a certain point, the celebrities are just playing themselves in the suits of these characters. But I really didn't encounter that in this one. That might have been my most pleasant surprise watching this movie. Is it has this really star-studded cast, but they're all actually playing a character, which in some capacities kind of begs the question why even get all these stars. But I think that's ultimately better than them just playing themselves. Let's see. One I was dreading but ended up really liking was that Chloe Grace Moretz is Wednesday in this, and I'm sure she's super nice in real life, Chloe Grace Moretz, but I kind of just roll my eyes at her, kind of because I associate her with Kick-Ass and Kick-Ass 2, which are two of my least favorite movies. Um, I can't think of what else she's really been in, but this is probably my favorite thing I've seen her in. She actually has some character to her Wednesday. It's not just Chloe Grace Moretz talking; she's actually performing and in character, and she was very charming as Wednesday. I thought she captured that character really well, and I really liked this version of Wednesday as a whole. Like I said, I feel like sometimes Addams Family can go down a really mean-spirited route, which I mean for easy enough reasons. I mean, they're all about being macabre and gruesome. Beg your pardon. But I suppose just sometimes it can get kind of, oh, well, we're gonna get all the normies. I don't know. So yeah, it was kind of nice that this Wednesday had an arc where she makes friends with people that aren't just like her, and she's not completely antisocial and a complete psychopath like some people write her as. So I thought that was kind of neat. I really like, probably my favorite character in this film was Finn Wolfhard as Pugsley Adams. I thought, uh, he's probably, it's probably Finn Wolfhard being Finn Wolfhard more than anyone else in the cast. But I think he suits the character really well, and at the risk of showing my lack of Addams Family know-how, if you will, um, I feel like this is the most well-defined Pugsley in his interests and roles, because in like, especially in the live-action movies, he seemed like just a dumb pinhead who Wednesday would rope around into her schemes. Where in this movie, he's given an identity as an inventor and kind of a demolitions expert almost, a little out of left field. But you can kind of apply the whole mad scientist stock role to him as far as the Addams Family archetypes go, which I think is a neat touch. I don't know if that was ever a present thing in like the old comics or anything like that. It's definitely not something I picked up from like the movies and the little Addams Family material that I've surveyed. There was some hints of like he would occasionally use gadgets and stuff, but it seemed like he was, like I said, just kind of rolling around with what Wednesday had in mind. Like she was actually the more inventive one. So they did a really good job giving him his own identity. He's actually pretty sympathetic. His whole arc kind of revolves around this coming of age festival that's tradition in the Addams Family, like just the long line. It's like a dance with a saber. I can't remember the actual word they use for it, even though they say it a billion times in the movie. Um, and he's just kind of under the pressure that he won't be able to live up to it, and Gomez really wants him to succeed, and it's never like a thing where you're frustrated with either one of them. It's not Pugsley being lazy and not being able to catch on, or Gomez being overly hard on him. It's just kind of they both really want Pugsley to do well, and he's just not that capable. And I think that's a story that doesn't get touched on all that much, is that sometimes, no matter how hard you try, you're just not that great at something, including this coming of age swords dance, silly as that sounds. Gomez and Morticia, to cover them, they're kind of what you would expect from them. Gomez, I feel, is always a very likable character because of his enthusiasm. He has this extreme lust for life that's very present in the Oscar Isaac version of him. And Morticia, she's also kind of what you'd expect. I always see a lot of posts about how Gomez and Morticia are almost subversive in that they're a slightly sitcom suburban-esque couple, but they completely unabashedly love each other. And there's never the sense of, oh, why did I get married? And that's pretty present in this movie. I think if that's a dynamic you like in those characters, you won't be disappointed, even though they really aren't the focal point. And neither is their relationship. It's really more about how each parent connects to each kid in the A plot and B plot, which I think is a kind of neat approach. There's also Nick Kroll is Uncle Fester, which he's completely comic relief. He's not terribly consequential to the plot or anything, which, yeah, I think that's how Fester fits well. I feel like I said, I didn't like when he was this extremely focal, overly complicated plot point in the Christopher Lloyd portrayal. And I love Christopher Lloyd. I think he's so miscast as Fester. I just don't think he's very funny in the role. And I don't think Christopher Lloyd plays a very good simpleton. I love him as like Doc Brown and Rasputin and Professor Plum, and I don't see why they decided he should be Fester. Back on track, but yeah, Nick Kroll. I reckon and like I said, it's not just Nick Kroll being Nick Kroll; it's Nick Kroll being Fester. I think that's kind of neat. The voice he chooses for it sounds vaguely familiar, but it's distinct enough that I'm sure I've heard it in some cartoon that Nick Kroll is in, but I can't tell you off the top of my head, so I mean, that's something. Yeah, so I overall like how every character is, used and portrayed here. I think the character designs are pretty phenomenal as well. They base them more off of the old comics than any recent live action iteration or anything along those lines. And I think it's a nice touch to see that very old, sketchy art style brought to 3D. And there's some shots where I think they look phenomenal. Their dimensions can be a little weird at certain angles, but I think ultimately I've seen far worse 3D to 2D to 3D transitioning character designs. Some of Pugsley's facial expressions, just his like vapid-eyed, stupid idiot looks, I genuinely want as reaction gifs at some point. Um, so the Addams Family themselves are pretty good. Where the movie kind of falls apart is that they introduce kind of the right. It's like the plot is that the Addams Family mansion is directly adjacent to a newly assimilated town in New Jersey, and that's where we kind of get our conflict and our villain. Her name is Margot Needler. She's played by Allison Janney, who I was really pleased to see in a big movie like this. She's the lead in a sitcom called Mom with shit. I can't remember her name. Blonde girl married to Chris Pratt for a little bit. It'll come to me. You can Google that. I'm sure you're screaming at me right now. Yeah, I think she's really good in this part as the super preppy realtor, home designer, weird soccer mom who's like pretty psycho. I think her voice is so perfect for that part. The most hilarious thing about this character is that her name is Margot, spelled with an X. That's the best gag they have in this. Yeah. But like I said, this is where it kind of is a little less funny. As much praise as I had to those ideas, the town itself is called Assimilation, which I'm like, you can do so much better than that. There's a part where like teenagers that live in that town are like singing in a pageant, and they sing a song where the lyrics are literally, "Why be yourself when you can be like everyone else?" You can, they're they're far more poetic and like more underhandedly funny ways to express that this is a town where everyone wants to fit in and assimilate than calling your town Assimilation. And I'm not saying I expect Shakespearean levels of double entendre from the Addams Family animated movie, but I think they could have done a little bit better. Also, the character designs in the Assimilation town, it's straight up called Assimilation, and they're gonna be what I call it. They're all super ugly and kind of hard to look at, which I think was only distracting because the Addams Family characters look so good. Oh, I didn't even mention Lurch. Lurch is I have a super sentimental spot for Lurch because back in like elementary school, like I couldn't have been older than 7 or so. I played flag football and my coach called me Lurch because I was the tallest kid on the team. So I've always had that slight resonance with Lurch. He's a fun character. Oh, and Snoop Dogg is cousin it for like 2 seconds. It's nothing. They give it all away in the It's nothing. You've seen it if you've seen the trailer. Who cares? Yeah, the assimilation characters. It's all just like the bland, like fitting in people who live in the prim perfect town, and they look super lame. There's just like it's like, and when the Addams Family characters are so well designed and so well accommodated for their setting, and then it's almost jarring to have to switch to these super bland looking characters to the point that they're like just hard to look at. And I bet that's kind of the point. Like I'm sure I sound kind of ridiculous for pointing out that the characters who are supposed to be super bland and like one stockish are that way, but it still doesn't make it pleasant to look at, especially when we spend big chunks of this movie focusing on them, surprisingly so. They get the occasional good line. There's one line I love. The villain lady goes, it's like her daughter criticizes their use of plastic flowers, and she goes, "Plastic flowers last forever." I think that's like a good line. It kind of like, you can take it as a further metaphor for why they prefer the artificial and what fits in, that kind of thing. I would have loved more writing like that than calling the town Assimilation, for heaven's sake. Um, and yeah, as you can probably guess, it's just kind of the clash of the cultures is kind of the central conflict. The Addams family don't fit in. The people of assimilation fear them, and you've kind of seen this before. And that's kind of why the movie ultimately lands a little bit forgettable. As much praise as I had for it, it's kind of strange because this is my second mission debrief after It Chapter 2, and I had so many mean things to say about that movie and so many nice things to say about this one when I think they're ultimately of equal quality, of like 6 out of 10, did some things well, did some things really badly. And I think that's because had really high expectations of It Chapter 2, and they just completely let me down. Whereas I had kind of low expectations of this one, just not being fond of the Addams family and not really having much pedigree to go on for this movie. And it actually surprised me by how much strong stuff it brought forward despite its glaring weaknesses. So even though I'm super nice to this movie, I still think it's like a C minus. I'm just kind of surprised that I liked it as much as I did. There was a part of me that just expected to hate it, so kind of clearing that up. It's just kind of my gut reaction. There's and like I said, a strength is that they don't bring forward that total mean spiritedness of the Adams. What I kind of like is Wednesday goes to assimilation. She wants to join the other kids at school, and she makes friends with the villain lady's daughter. And they kind of share each other's cultures. She brings home a splash of Wednesday starts wearing a pink hair beret, and Morticia is shocked. And the villain lady's daughter, Parker, who she's kind of a whatever character, but she starts dressing goth because she starts to take influence from Wednesday, and their respective moms are like at each other's throats. It's kind of that situation, and I do kind of like just that idea that the Adams kind of adapting to another culture, being the preppy, squeaky clean town. And I guess why that's appealing to me is that this is the rare instance of an Addams family work where I feel they're not completely in control. Like usually it's that they're the scary people, and they have these powers and these gadgets, and they just have total control over anyone that dares step to them. Whereas to now they're because Wednesday is kind of accepting this completely opposite lifestyle. Morticia is at more of a challenge, at a loss, and it kind of I feel like it kind of slaps, because you see Adam's Family stuff where it's like, oh well, normal people are lame, but if you think about it, they kind of point out that Wednesday is like, my family isn't accepting to change either, so in a way our parents have like the same mentality, and I think that's a very mature way to look at it. They don't touch on it a ton, and I'm not trying to give this movie too much credit because, like I said, it's ultimately just average, but I like the ideas it brings forward. And along with that, it had some really fun gags. I really there's one part where Morticia is shocked at seeing Wednesday with the hair beret, and she gasps and flushes red, and then a bat flies by, sucks the blood out of her like flushed face and neck, and flies off as if it's there, as if it's there just for that purpose. I thought that was kind of a cute gag. And I was concerned going in because, like I said, Adam's Family in the past stuff, it's like the best Adam's Family joke is Morticia being like, have a bad day at school, kids, because we like things that are bad, because we're different. And I just like that stuff like that just makes me groan so badly. Or I think of Morticia reading, like, the point in the Addams Family movie where they have to get jobs, and Morticia's like a teacher, and she's reading the kids a sad story that makes them cry, and that's the joke. Like, you see the joke here is that the Addams like scary and bad things, and other people don't really take to that. I thought it'd be a lot of lame humor like that, but they actually do some clever stuff. Despite the first joke in the movie, not the first joke, but one of the opening jokes, the movie opens on Morticia and Gomez's wedding day. I thought that was kind of a nice touch. And the officiator of the wedding goes, as the Addams Family tradition, we put the lime in the coconut, shake it all up. And they do, and they just take out a coconut and squeeze the lime into it. I was like, oh god, I'm in for it. I can't believe we're making a lime in the coconut joke in 2019. Are you serious? Give me a break here. But that was like a bad first step, and then jokes after that actually started to land, and I got a lot more enthusiastic as it went on. So it could have been worse. I also think of like when Gomez is preparing Pugsley for the big rite of passage festival thing, and he says something to the effect of like, it's your whole family is going to judge you and scrutinize you for the rest for that'll affect you for the rest of your life. I hear it's similar to what some call Thanksgiving. That was, and none of these are like knee slappers, but there's a bit with Gomez going into a coffee shop and leaving with a pile of coffee grounds in a cup that he's eating with a spoon. And that's never something I would think of as like an Addams Family joke. But it tracks because it's like, yeah, they want something that's completely dark and bitter and like utterly unpleasant to most, and they just take to it, and it looks like he's like eating ice cream. I think, yeah, that's smart. That's a humorous avenue I never would have thought of. And as the movie goes on, So yeah, the conflict unfolds kind of as you'd expect. At first, the two families are at odds, and then they're friends in the end. They realize they're not so different after all. And that's kind of a weakness in this movie. I could really just kind of see a lot of things coming. It wasn't the most clever, but it was fine. It was better than I expected. There was some really strange bits in there. The fact that the villain's final assault on the Addams family is to bring up a medieval looking catapult is super strange. I wonder what was going on in the writers' room that day, especially when she mentioned earlier, oh, I can have sledgehammers in here to remodel your house. And it's like, why didn't she have like construction vehicles? That would have made way more sense. Why a medieval catapult? There's a lot of things in there that just kind of make me wonder that the chains of command just weren't quite connected. And something about this movie felt like it needed another few minutes in the oven, as if there'd be a pretty well done sequence or idea, but then for some like strange reason, the next scene I would feel like I'm watching like a seasonal Cartoon Network movie. If you could, I know that's awfully specific, but just something way lower budget and kind of made just to tick a box. And that was a really strange feeling to have. But ultimately, I don't think this movie commits any majorly grievous crimes. At the same time, I don't think it achieves the highest of highs. I think it's suitable to watch around Halloween if you want something to do, and that's kind of it, and it fulfills that purpose pretty well. There's a lot of Halloween movies I'd probably rather watch than this one, but if you're dying to see new Addams Family content, I don't think this will disappoint. So this was a pretty good movie. Yeah, not much else to ramble on about, I suppose. Hope you all enjoyed this mission debrief. This has been Striker Star 19 signing off. Have a lovely day.